Why is Himalayan pink salt so expensive? You must have already seen this salt. It is the star of social media, supposedly mystical, and found in all organic stores at outrageous prices. €5 per bag of salt? What if it was a scam? First of all, it doesn't really come from the Himalayas, but from a mine much further away in Pakistan. There, at 300 meters deep, are the remnants of an ancient sea. 600 million tons of salt, the largest salt mine in the world. This salt is nothing exceptional. According to ads, it supposedly contains 84 trace elements. The reality is that it's just 98% regular salt colored by metallic impurities. It even contains traces of arsenic, lead, and uranium. Pink salt stones are attributed magical properties, except that it doesn't exist in any traditional culture. It's a mystique entirely invented by the West, by marketing. Marketing that makes you believe it's rare, difficult to extract. The reality once again is mistreated. Miners pay $3 for a ton of extracted salts. A product neither organic, nor eco-friendly, nor responsible. Pink salt is just an Instagrammer's whim that costs humanity dearly. Why is this mushroom more expensive than truffles? When we think of luxury mushrooms, we think of truffles. The black diamond of cuisine. 1 kilo of black Perigord truffle costs between 400 and 1,000 euros. In Italy, a 1 kilo white Alba truffle has even been sold for over $120,000. It's very hard to find wild truffles. Of course, they can be cultivated, but it takes almost 10 years for a very uncertain harvest on top of that. Once picked, after so much waiting, their taste and smell disappear very quickly. In less than 36 hours, they must be sent to the restaurateur. Despite all that, the truffle is not the most expensive mushroom. Here's the Yarsagumba, 125 euros per gram. It's almost 3 times more expensive than gold. In China, it's an exceptional gift that can be framed or consumed. Its nickname being the Viagra of the Himalayas. If you find that it looks like a caterpillar, that's normal. It's actually a parasitic fungus that grows inside a real caterpillar. It's extremely rare, growing only at a certain altitude 1 week per year. To find it, villagers are forced to crawl over every inch of the mountain on all fours. Due to overharvesting, the fungus is now endangered. This creates tensions between villages that fight for control of cliffs. All these disputes just to make certain things stand up. Why is Wagyu beef so expensive? A marble pink, melt in your mouth like butter. Japanese Wagyu beef is considered the best in the world. 45 million views for this tasting that cost 115 euros just for the steak. Wagyu, it just means Japanese cow. If this meat is so well known, it's thanks to the exceptional quality of Kobe beef. It's said that the cows there are massaged, serenaded with classical music, and given beer. The reality is more, that indeed their stress is minimized, but the trick is rather that they are overfed while limiting their physical activity so that the meat is as little muscled as possible. Another characteristic is that the breed is pure. For 1200 years, Japan was Buddhist and therefore vegetarian. Meat consumption was prohibited by law. Japanese cows were therefore never selected for their meat, nor were they crossbred, hence their unique taste. Until 2013, the export of this meat was prohibited. You had to go to Japan to eat it. Even today, it's very limited. Only 3 restaurants in Paris are officially supplied. Why then can you find Wagyu almost everywhere in the country? It's because not all Wagyu comes from Japan. In the 90s, the country sold seeds to Australia, which allowed Wagyu to be raised outside of Japan. More recently in France, 2 Wagyu farms have been opened. Maybe over the years, prices will drop. Another exceptional meat at equally crazy prices. These are the Iberian Belota hams, considered the most expensive cured meat in the world. This shiny red with an exceptional hazelnut taste is achieved thanks to a pure breed of black pig, raised outdoors in oak meadows, fed only on acorns fallen to the ground, all protected by a PDO. Needless to say, the price goes up. Whole hams at 800 euros, and a record at $13,000. Bought by a Japanese person, the circle is complete. Why are oysters and lobsters so expensive? These are the 2 seafoods associated with luxury and opulence. Yet for a long time, it was the opposite. The world was infested with oysters and lobsters. The latter were called the cockroaches of the sea. In fact, they weren't even eaten. They were for pigs or fishing bait. It became a luxury product thanks to the elites of big cities. Let's take oysters. You transport them from the sea to Paris by horse before they died. You can imagine that drives up the price. Their richness in iodine is, however, essential for human health, especially when living far from the oceans. Moreover, it was considered an aphrodisiac that Casanova himself used. The kings were so fond of them that Louis XVI was nicknamed Louis of the Oysters, after he was seen eating more than 150 in one sitting. One day at the palace, a shipment arrived late. The oysters could not be served to the king. Francois Vatel, the head chef, felt so dishonored that he preferred to open his belly to take his own life in his kitchen. These 2 seafoods eventually spread throughout society and became a common product again. Before, they were sold on the street like hot dog stands. In New York at the beginning of the 20th century, more than a ton of oysters was consumed every day. Lobster, on the other hand, ended up canned, served as mush to the poorest. To meet the demand, child labor labor was massively used. That doesn't make for very good press, and soon oysters became the symbol of their exploitation, an overproduction that ended badly. For lobster, it has become very difficult to find them in the wild, and they can be farmed, but it's very costly. It takes 7 years for them to become adults, and they must be well isolated from others since they are cannibalistic. For oysters, it's even worse. The farms have been wiped out by industrial air pollution, but also diseases. French oysters were decimated. They were then replaced by Portuguese oysters, also decimated. And today, the ones you eat are actually of Japanese origin, much more resistant. Oysters soon had the image of spoiled, polluted food, bad for health. It was necessary to react, and that increased the prices. The quality of the water is now over control. We check that each oyster is alive by hand. The most pampered, the royal oysters from Coffin Bay in Australia, are cultivated for 7 years and sold for 60 euros each. They are still not the most expensive seafood. Abalones, a species of algae-eating snails, are considered the truffles of the sea, 80 euros per kilo. The percebes from Costa de la Mort, a Spanish specialty, can sell for 100 euros per kilo. The most expensive shellfish in the world is also the ugliest. The price is justified here by the fact that one must risk their life to retrieve them. They only grow in the wave, where the stones are as sharp as razors. To eat percebes, deaths are frequent. What is the most expensive coffee in the world? There is a coffee that all enthusiasts wish to taste. The one considered by specialists as the best in the world, 98 out of 100, according to the Coffee Review reference. We are talking about Guaisha coffee. It grows in Panama, on the slopes of the Baru volcano, at 1600 meters altitude in a misty microclimate. Needless to say, these conditions are not found everywhere. The production is small, and the price is astronomical. 900 euros per kilo minimum. Some Grand Crus sell for 9,000. If you want to taste a single small espresso cup of this Grand Cru, it will cost you 75 euros in a San Francisco cafe. Yet, it's not the most expensive coffee, it's rather this one. The Kopi Luwak, some charge 42 euros per 100 grams. If you think it looks like a droppings, it's normal. It's nicknamed the civet coffee. It's literally a civet cat dropping that has eaten coffee. The characteristic of this animal is that it is very odorous. It produces a stinky anal liquid which, once diluted, gives the scent of musk found in perfumery. Inside its stomach, its particular enzymes transform the coffee, giving it a strong, dark chocolate taste. Well, that's on paper. People on YouTube who have tasted it find it to be a bland, earthy coffee that lacks flavor. In truth, if Kopi Luwak coffee is so expensive, it's because it's a tourist trap. Originally, these droppings were rare to collect in the wild, but today, they are produced in huge farms where civet cats are crammed, forced to excrete coffee all day for the pleasure of vacationing tourists. The legend of Da Hong Pao tea, the most expensive in the world. In China, there is a sacred tea, a tea produced by the trees of Huyi Mountain, which, according to legend, cured a woman's illness. The emperor's mother, to thank them, he dressed all the tea trees in long red robes, hence the name Da Hong Pao. These trees still exist, and they are guarded by soldiers, their leaves reserved for the powerful. In 1972, American President Nixon met Mao, who offered him 200 grams of this tea. Nixon, a bit offended by such a small amount, reportedly asked why. Mao had just given him half of the year's harvest. The tea trees stopped producing in 2005. The last harvest sold for a fortune, 20 grams for 208,000 yen. It is considered the best tea in the world, the king of teas. You are probably disappointed to never be able to taste it. Rest assured, clones have been made. Less prestigious, of course, but still very expensive. 320 euros per kilo, to be savored very slowly. Why is champagne so expensive? How did a simple sparkling white wine manage to become the drink of the wealthy? Champagne is nothing exceptional except for being produced in the Champagne region. It's protected by a PDO. It cannot be made anywhere else but in this very small geographical area. As a result, land prices have skyrocketed. A hectare of vineyards in the area costs almost 2 million euros. Some Grand Cru plots exceed 50. Inevitably, the price of grapes rises, 7 euros per kilo directly from the producer, and that's barely enough to fill a bottle. Not to mention that the PDO requires everything to be done by hand, from the harvest to the making of the barrels, which further increases the production costs. A high price also because it's artificially maintained. In Champagne, it's the big houses that reign, and the big houses are the large groups like LVMH who owns them. To limit any competition, they buy the grapes at a high price. No one can keep up. Afterwards, if you want really expensive wines, I advise you to forget the bubbles and turn towards the Romanée Conti Grand Cru, one of the best wines in the world. A tiny plot and exorbitant prices. 12,000 euros for a recent bottle, 558,000 for the 1945 vintage. To be consumed in moderation. Why pay a fortune for swallow nests, huh? But who would eat nests? It's straw. It's not good. In fact, swallow nests are a bit special. First, they're not swallows, but several subspecies of swiftlets who build their nests by regurgitating a gelatinous mucus. Edible mucus, considered in China as a luxury delicacy, the food of emperors, the caviar of the East. Oh yes, also it's supposed to be an aphrodisiac, otherwise it's not fun. Prices have skyrocketed from 3,000 to 10,000 euros per kilo, a price justified by the danger. The swiftlets lay their eggs high up in dark and humid places like caves deep in the jungle or on the edges of steep cliffs. Collecting them requires deadly climbs, not to mention armed poachers trying to retrieve the loot. Each nest is then meticulously cleaned with tweezers to remove the droppings and feathers. Despite all that, the price is less about labor than rarity. Overconsumption has decimated 88% of swiftlets in Asia. The species is in trouble, and do you know what's the worst? The price. The people who die, the species going extinct. All that for something that has no taste. Swallow nests only add gelatinous texture to the soup. Great. Why are saffron and vanilla so expensive? While strolling through the supermarket, you may have already seen those capsules that cost 5 euros, or those mysterious empty jars with 3 poor red threads fighting a duel. 5 euros as well. It's saffron, and it's worth 1,500 euros per kilo. Produced in France, it goes up to 30,000. The taste of saffron is unique and mysterious, impossible to describe, but everyone wants to put it in their dishes. The problem is that it's horribly difficult to produce. It is actually the stigma of a flower that has only 3, and it takes 600,000 to make a kilo. A very fragile flower that blooms only once a year. It needs to rain the day before, not on the day itself, and be harvested early in the morning of its blooming for maximum quality. The stigmas are then extracted with tweezers, flower by flower. A production difficulty that reminds me a lot of vanilla, which is the second most expensive spice in the world after saffron. 350 euros per kilo nonetheless. It too is a flower, an orchid, that needs to be pollinated by hand. Originally, vanilla is Mexican. There, a small bee takes care of the work. But when bourbon vanilla was introduced to Madagascar and Réunion, there are no bees to pollinate the vanilla, hence the manual work. Today, 80% of the world's production happens there, a region subject to cyclones that can devastate all this work, not to mention the extremely numerous thefts. All this increases the prices, especially with organic. Many companies want to put real vanilla in their yogurt. Prices have skyrocketed. Cruel that such a fine spice is today considered as the basic flavor, the steak and fries of ice creams. Why is caviar so expensive? Here is Alma's white caviar. Its price, 35,000 euros per kilo, the most expensive caviar in the world. Alma's in Russian as in Arabic means diamond, and it's quite aptly named. Caviar comes from the sturgeon, a prehistoric fish. 245 million years ago, a little before the dinosaurs, these fish already existed. An extraordinary longevity that only humans have managed to break. Yes, caviar is expensive because we have almost killed all the sturgeons. Today, it is actually forbidden to fish for wild caviar. Everything must now be done in farms, and it's not easy. It takes 10 to 20 years for a female to lay eggs. It's impossible to distinguish males from females for several years. So you end up feeding this big capricious fish for decades without being sure of the return on investment. And you know the worst part, the sturgeon being a prehistoric fish, it's not very well designed. Females generally open their bellies by rubbing against rocks to lay eggs. That's what humans do. They cut open the animal to retrieve its eggs. 20 years of waiting for a single laying. Fortunately today, we have managed to find spawning hormones that allow us to collect the eggs without injuring the animal. This allows for multiple harvests. This is what we now use in France and Italy, because you should know they are among the largest producers of caviar in the world. Surprising, but yes, the Russians are far behind. The number 1 remains the Chinese with the giant farm Kaluga Queen, which produces 35% of all the world's caviar. Why are fruits so expensive in Japan? We agree, seeing melons sold for 100 euros in a supermarket is not common. Well, it is in Japan. 2 Yubari King melons were even bought at auction for over $45,000. Same for this bunch of grapes, 11,000 for 24 Roman ruby grapes. Such outrageous prices, you have them for all fruits from apples to strawberries. So what is so special about them? Did they grow in an emperor's garden? Do they have an exceptional taste? Not even. They are just visually perfect. In Japan, fruit is an art. It's a gift you offer to your most prestigious guests, not just something you slip into your backpack for your 4 o'clock snack. That's why you can see Japanese farmers taking great care of each of their melons, massaging them every day. Also, they eliminate imperfect fruits, which causes a lot of waste. A logic maintained by the Japanese agricultural system, very centered around collectives that control everything. They set the price, the marketing with lots of intermediaries who take a commission, and ultimately auctions for the most beautiful foods. It's the same for fishing, and that's why you see bluefin tuna going for $1.8 million. A big fish like that will only produce 10,000 pieces of sushi. Here the person buys the prestige, the fact of having bought the first, the most beautiful, the biggest fish for their restaurant, which will make its publicity, its reputation. They are happy. I hope I made you hungry with this video. It also allowed you to know what is the best, the most expensive in each category of food. That way you can show off at the table at Christmas. Remember to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and give a thumbs up. Maybe one day I'll be able to afford this kind of dish, and I'll even invite a subscriber. Thank Thank you for following us. Thanks to the editors for their work. Come on, friends. Bye.